Loud and Quiet presents Midnight Chats.
It's late, listeners. Welcome to a brand new Midnight Chats, the third one of this fresh run of episodes, Series 7. And I think it's going quite well so far. Cheers to Stuart for last week's podcast. That was Jason Williamson from Sleaford Mods, chatting about eating spoons of mayonnaise out of the fridge. Really enjoyed that. And before that, we had Yanis from Foles helping us kick the whole thing off. And we're here with you every Thursday at midnight for the next 8 weeks or so now. As I said in that series opener, we spent the time in between finishing the last series and starting this current one, recording new chats. And the one you're listening to here was back in January on Blue Monday, the so-called most depressing day of the year. I think that's just some baloney cooked up in a marketing boardroom somewhere to sell a few gym memberships. But saying that, it was dark and it was very cold in our drafty office, and about 12 hours after this, London was covered in a deep blanket of snow. So it was peak winter bleakness. So thank you to this evening's guest, Stella Donnelly, for coming by to cheer us up with her infectious energy. We've wanted Stella on the podcast for a while. We featured her in our magazine, Loud and Quiet, a few years back when she first came to London from Australia to play a show. That was after we'd heard Thrush Metal, her first EP, and she's done so much in the time since. When we recorded this, she was on a whistle-stop tour of Europe to talk about her debut album, Beware of the Dogs, which very conveniently is out now on Secretly Canadian. And all of the reviews I've read have been deservedly full of praise. And this conversation goes to a few disparate places. As a child, Stella spent a few years living in Swansea before moving to Australia. So we talk about her connections to Wales, her memories of that time, stereophonics and catatonia and all of that. We got on to hypnotherapy and how that's helped her fear of flying. Also, stick with us because towards the end of this, she tells a great story about something her dad did on her 18th birthday in front of all of her family and friends. And he sounds like a total character. And before we get into this, just to clarify something, if you don't know Stella's work that well, we talk about a song called Boys Will Be Boys, which is a track that Stella wrote about a friend's experience of rape. And that's a key bit of info to contextualise the stuff where we're talking about the significance and the power of that song. In fact, the album generally doesn't shy away from issues that could be perceived as heavier like that. And that's what makes it essential. But it also mixes that alongside a wicked, sweary sense of humour that I think also comes out in this conversation. So the best thing you can do is go and give that album a listen, or even better still, go and see Stella live. Just finally, apologies to any Welsh listeners for my rubbish attempt at the accent. Definitely not my strong point. You'd have thought I'd been better at that considering that I lived there for a couple of years. Anyway, here we go. This is Stella Donnelly on Midnight Chats, episode 66. Before we start, I just wanted to check, when you were dreaming about a successful career in music, is this how you imagined it would be? You'd be in a kind of pokey office in East London on a cold January day with basically one heater there. It's probably just about keeping us both alive.
Wow.
This is the height of glamour, isn't it?
It's funny you said that. I had this exact dream, I think on the 23rd of November, 1994. I think I was 2 years old, and I had this dream that I was going to be here speaking to you, Greg.
Yeah.
Thank you for making it happen. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad we could just make that dream happen.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Today's Blue Monday, apparently, which is, I think, originated as an artificially created sales thing, a bit like
yes,
things
the
like Black Friday
sales. Yes, yes.
It's apparently the most depressing day of the year.
Oh my
in the northern hemisphere, at least.
Right, yeah.
Because
in Australia, we're all partying down there. It's the happiest day ever. But, up here...
Yeah,
wow.
this is supposed to be the most miserable day of the year. But I think this podcast, we're gonna hopefully
lighten
cheer
up.
some people up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, I just got some real Joni Mitchell blue kind of vibes. And that actually made me feel more cozy than depressed.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good.
Maybe that's
good.
the Australian in me, though. Maybe this is also novel up here. It's so cold. And
you're far too
so
optimistic.
cold and cute. You're all so cute with your miserable cold faces up here.
And your scars and your frostbite.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in London? Have you just arrived from Australia?
I arrived 24 hours ago, but not from Australia. So I came from America. So I'm not too jet lagged. I'm kind of,
So back home at the moment in Australia, I don't know what it's like on the West Coast, but certainly parts of Australia are going through a record-breaking heat wave, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the same in the West. Yeah. We're lucky in my hometown in Fremantle. We're lucky to have the ocean right there. So we do get the breeze that comes in at around like 4 o'clock. We talk about the wind so much in Perth and in Fremantle, and my partner noticed it because he's from Melbourne, and he noticed how much we talk about the breeze and the sea breeze, and we call it the Fremantle Doctor actually, and it's like the doctor comes in, or the doctor's in. Oh, when's the doctor coming in today? Like because. It's a big wind, like it's a big breeze, especially like in the winter time. Sometimes the doctor just stays in for 3 months, and it's this whipping wind over the Indian Ocean, and sometimes it brings in like some interesting smells from out on the boats, like the live export ships and some terrible things. But yeah, it's a really so we've kind of got that breeze that comes in, and you know that you should go to the beach in the morning because in the afternoon you're just going to get sand everywhere, and we're very much like in touch with that. So we're lucky to have the Frio Doctor. In summer because it kind of cools the heat wave a little bit.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about Fremantle in a bit, and also you've been writing songs and performing around like the Perth area for a number of years. But in terms of the people that have maybe heard your name but don't necessarily know your story that well, you do have British connections, Welsh connections in particular. Tell me and those people listening a little bit about that.
Well, hello.
Look you.
Stella from the Valleys now, all right? How you doing? All right?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of Ness there.
A bit of Nessa. All right, Neil, how you doing? All right? So my mum is Welsh, and my dad's Aussie, and we moved up to Wales from Australia when I was about 5, and we went to a Welsh-speaking school, so siarad tybed bach o Gymraeg, speak a little bit of Welsh, and it comes back whenever I come home, it comes back whenever I come back, and then it goes away again whenever I'm back in Australia. But, lived here for, I think about 3 years, 4 years, not very long, and then moved back to Australia. But that time in my life, I think you're such a sponge at that age, till about 10 years old, you're such a sponge. So that part of my life is so vivid, and I consider it such a big part of my identity. And I guess the Welsh culture is so strong and proud and, full. And in Australia, as a white Australian, we don't really have that. We've got beautiful culture and we've got beautiful things, but there's nothing really historical and deeply entrenched like the Welsh, the Welsh language and songs and poetry and art and all of those things. So the food, everything. So having that part of my childhood was a really beautiful, and I feel really lucky. It was a beautiful thing, and I feel really lucky to have had that.
What kind of strong memories from that period? Is it the beautiful kind of sandy beaches of South Wales? Was it the...
Definitely not. I got some other nice beach memories,
Welsh
unfortunately.
Cakes.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, the beaches were nice, but it was mostly, for me, it was I'd come from Australia, so the beaches were like, okay.
Average.
But, sorry, no offence. But it was really kind of... I guess it was my mum's family, my aunties are both actors, and they've both kind of really, really interesting and intelligent and larger than life characters. So, and my grandmother, my mum Guy, is as well. So having them around all the time, there was always something crazy happening. We were always doing an adventure, and my auntie lives in this crazy, beautiful old Georgian house in Llandela, and I just have these crazy memories of making like a pink blancmange and going to the park, just silly things and singing, I think, was the big one. We'd go to chapel every Sunday and there'd always be singing. And I think that's one thing I've really noticed is that the Welsh aren't embarrassed about that. I played in Cardiff last year and my family, friends and family all came down to the show at Clwb Ifo Bach, and I had cousins that came and friends and husbands that are builders and, kind of very manly, masculine men. And they all came up into the green room and just started singing. And even the men and even the young boys, everyone is just singing the songs, and there's no kind of ego or embarrassment about it. It's just, and I think that part of my childhood really kind of shaped me to really gravitate towards the music and the arts and those things. So
that you already mentioned, the Welsh are incredibly proud of their nation.
Yes.
And they tend to kind of very much like wear that on their sleeve,
absolutely.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Is your mum quite a sort of proud Welsh?
She is, yeah. I mean, she's a bit more, Mum's really like a very compassionate person, and she really kind of, they say that when you have high empathy, you tend to kind of take on the accent of the country that you're in. And she really did that when she moved to Australia. She was really accepted into that Australian lifestyle, and she travelled through India for a long time. So she's got that Welsh like passion, but it definitely, I notice it come back whenever she goes home and comes back. Her accent is so strong, and she starts cooking on cawl and all these different foods again, and I can tell she gets cabin fever when she doesn't get to go back for a while. I can tell that she gets this kind of feeling. There's a Welsh word for it called hiraeth or hiraeth, I think hiraeth, and there's no English translation, but it's essentially like a longing for home, a longing for the motherland. And I can tell that she gets that sometimes. So
your mum sounds a lot more subtle than my mum.
Yeah, she's very subtle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
my mum's part Welsh.
Oh.
But as she's got older, she's really sort of gravitated towards her Welsh roots. And she likes to hang a flag out of the window of our house down the street when Wales are playing in the rugby.
Amazing. That's a brave thing to do.
Yeah, she just likes
Does she live in England?
Yeah,
oh,
she likes to terrorise the English neighbours.
Good on her.
Yeah. I think the Welsh love to do that, though. They kind of do they love I don't like the word, but they do like the banter with the English in particular.
The English deserve it, No offence, but yes, actually offence intended. Yeah. The Welsh, if the Welsh could have a laugh with the English about it, then that's pretty cool,
Yeah. The Welsh are also really not only proud of their nationality and their language and things like that, but obviously music. So when I lived in Wales, it was kind of a given, and I hope this doesn't come across as a cliche, but particularly the Welsh people that I lived with were all genuinely big fans of Stereophonics.
Yes,
and
oh my God.
Catatonia and Manic Street Preachers.
Yes.
And if those bands came to town, they would turn out and go and see them.
Absolutely. My parents took me on my 18th birthday to see Stereophonics play in Fremantle. They happened to play in Fremantle on my 18th birthday. My parents didn't know that I'd gone out the night before at like midnight when I turned 18. So I was a little bit hungover, and apparently I fell asleep in the car on the way home, but we had the best time. And Stereophonics and Catatonia are two that have just been so part of my life for so long. All the drives in Wales when I was young, we'd have the cassette of Stereophonics or Catatonia. It was my dad really that when he came to Wales, Dad is really into all the Welsh music. Even though he's Australian, he kind of, gravitated towards all of those lyrics. And he really influenced that.
Cerys Matthews, who was the singer of
Genius.
Catatonia, she's got an amazing show on BBC Six Music. I don't know if you ever get a chance to listen to that.
I stream it.
Oh, do you?
I stream it from Australia,
Excellent.
yes.
She's amazing.
I can't get enough. I've picked up so many amazing bands from her, and old music as well, and all sorts of music. She's just got such a good taste, and I love her conversation and her voice. It's so calming to listen to on a Sunday.
She's super chill, isn't she?
Yeah, she's really great. She sounds 12 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Such a sweet voice, yeah.
Is it true that when living in Wales, you did have a part on a Welsh soap opera radio programme? Is that right? Tell me a bit about that.
It's very specific, isn't it? Welsh soap opera radio programme, only in the north. My auntie was on this show. So there's a Welsh show called Pobl y Cwm, which is People of the Valley. Yeah, so it's essentially our neighbours. And my aunties, both of them have been in that for a long time. Not anymore, but my auntie Rianne was Gloria in that show, and she was quite, quite well known around the time that she was that character. But there was this side show called Eileen, which was one of the characters from Pobla Cum. They made a radio soap opera about her, about that character. So it's kind of like almost like a fan fiction, I guess, of Pobla Cum, a spin-off, exactly. So I got to play Eileen's daughter, Sinead. I'd only been speaking Welsh for about 2 hours, and they got me up and did this radio show. And the most that I remember is driving up to Bangor from Swansea. Every second Friday I'd get to leave school early, and Dad and I would drive up to Bangor and we'd listen to, Stereophonics and Catatonia and the U2, early U2 as well. We had that cassette. And I would just remember the food mostly from that studio. I remember them giving me cookies and biscuits and, lollies and stuff like that. I don't remember much about the script.
Well, your auntie must have been like almost Welsh royalty, because Pobla Cum was like, if people haven't come across it, you mentioned Neighbours. Yeah. It's like EastEnders.
Yeah, absolutely.
On S4C, I think it was the channel that it was on.
S4C, Auntie Rhian won a BAFTA not too long ago, actually, a Welsh BAFTA. Yeah,
fantastic.
For her, she was in a Gwaith Cartref was the show, Homework in English. She's really paved the way for many, many Welsh actors. She's wonderful. Yeah, she's in that show.
Award-winning actor in your family.
I'm so
That's
lucky.
exciting.
My mum's actually the rebel of the three sisters. Mum became a nurse.
Okay.
She was the black sheep of the family, and became a nurse, and her two sisters are actors. And really,
that's amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Auntie Rhian if you're listening.
That sounds like that was quite a sort of strong memories from that period of time.
Yeah.
When you went back to Fremantle, or were you in Fremantle before you went to Wales?
Fremantle is where I live now. So I moved down. I'm a late comer to Fremantle. I claim it as my own now, but I've only been there for about 4 or 5 years. I moved down there, independently of my family, but my family live in a suburb up in the north of Perth, so it's a kind of just a regular suburbia kind of fishing town kind of place.
Is that what it's sort of known for? Is Fremantle kind of like a satellite town to Perth? Like, how would you consider
Fremantle is the port.
Okay.
So Fremantle is our port, and it's I guess it's maybe the Brighton but it's not as fancy.
Right.
And we're really lucky in Fremantle to have I guess people, that's where the first place, if you go to Western Australia by boat, which many people did back in the day, was the only way to get to the country, that's where you land, is in Fremantle. That's where you dock, is in Fremantle. So people from all countries came and emigrated, and during the war, a huge Italian population came by boat to Australia, and they got off in Fremantle and never left and opened up restaurants. So we have this beautiful Italian architecture and food and culture, and there's just this real hub of all sorts of foods. And then we had a huge Vietnamese population and then Chinese population. So all these kind of great food places are in Fremantle, and there's all this kind of heritage architecture from when the first boats came, and it's a very kind of cultural mecca.
Was it those factors that drew you to there rather than moving into the city and going to Perth?
Yeah, and all the really good music, yes, I think so, and all the really good music venues are in Fremantle. We've got a place called Mojo's, which is where all of us cut our teeth. It's where Tame Impala cut their teeth. It's where we all kind of play, and I still play there, but you could go there and do an open mic night on a Monday and then get a show, and then it's got music every night of the week, and it's such a great venue. So
So with that scene then, kind of paint a picture for me. You were in your teens when you first started performing and writing music. Did you feel like, did you have any nerves going about playing your first shows in Fremantle or wherever you were when you were playing your first shows? Just talk to me a little bit about your sort of beginnings and getting out there and playing music.
Yeah, well, I started out playing other people's songs really when I was 17, 18. I was playing covers at a market, like to make a bit of extra cash. Like when I was 15 in school, Mum would do her grocery shopping and I would sing on the corner in the food market and make about $20. And then eventually someone walked past who happened to book cover artists in restaurants. Okay. So he was like, I can make you some money. And I was like, okay, you'll have to talk to my dad, but okay. And then my first ever show was at a place called the Wanneroo Tavern, which is where you win a prize if you eat like this giant rump of steak. Like it's that kind of, I hope that like paints the picture for you. Yeah, exactly. I hope that paints the picture. It's a real kind of like, and there's like a TAB, which is like a sports bet kind of area, like, behind where you can smoke. And yeah, I would play in the corner for 3.5 hours doing covers while people eat their dinner. But I managed to, and my friends would come down because we were all young, we're 17 still. So my dad and mum would have to come because I was underage. So they'd bring my friends. They'd all go for dinner and, take photos. And that was, they were my first gigs. And then eventually I started playing in other people's bands, and working on their original projects. And I did that for a long time. There was one point when I was working in a cafe and working in a bar and playing in 6 bands, all different genres, all different instruments, all different things. But it was so much fun. I had a gig every night. Like sometimes I had to rush from one to the other, and it was so much fun. So that was really cool.
You didn't have any time for yourself if you're doing all of that.
Well, not really. And I guess at the time it was a really good distraction. I think I'd been pressuring myself for so long to do my own EP, do my own thing, put out your songs. And I wasn't ready. I clearly wasn't ready because I procrastinated for 5 or 6 years. I was 25 when the EP came out. So I procrastinated doing other people's stuff for so long, but I'm so glad I did that because it gave me so much perspective on other people's music and how to treat a band well and how to articulate yourself and, how to conduct yourself. I'd curate shows, I'd put on shows, I'd book other artists and stuff like that. So having those experiences under my belt has given me so much kind of, insight.
What was the first song that you wrote that you considered your own song that you were like, okay, now I'm ready to share this song as myself?
Yeah, it was Mechanical Bull.
It was, okay.
Yeah, it was Mechanical Bull. I put out the EP and then I don't even know. I think I just, I don't know why. Hang on, I'm just trying to think of the order of events because the EP came out on cassette tape. It was like 30 cassette tapes and that was it. And then I put Mechanical Bull on like all the social stuff, like on SoundCloud, I think. Yeah, it was SoundCloud, yeah. And people were listening to it on that. And then eventually the EP came out and everything went all things go.
Yeah.
And
what has the experience been like of the last 18 months? Because like you say, the EP came out, thrash metal, and a lot of opportunities have come your way since. You've made numerous trips to Europe, you've been in the States, you've obviously toured Australia fairly kind of heavily now. Does that long haul flight from Australia to the Europe, UK get any easier the more you do it?
No. There's a song on the album called Lunch, and it's about kind of that homesickness that you get before you leave. I tend to really embrace once I'm away, once I've got landed and I'm on the floor, on the ground, I'm there, I'm ready, I'm present and I'm excited and I love it and I really kind of flourish in that time. But that week leading up to leaving is really tough for me. I struggle to because when you're at home, you're vulnerable. I think, you allow yourself to be really comfortable around the people you love and they're your safety nets, so you're around them, you let go, and then all of a sudden you have to kind of go, oh, I've got to put up these walls again to survive. When you go on tour solo, you got to kind of like put up these protections for yourself just to get through it. Not that it's difficult, but when you travel a new place every day, it can get pretty exhausting mentally. So that week leading up to it is really tough, and I'm a really bad flyer. Okay. So that I've got a really bad fear of flying, and I've just haven't let it stop me. And the only changes that I've made is that I've just I've decided to just spend a little bit of extra money to fly on airlines that I feel safer on now, and I think that's the only change that I've made. And it has improved things, knowing that I don't have to catch a Ryanair flight or something like that, just makes me feel just when you have to do it so much and you have to do, so many flights in a year or whatever, knowing that you're at least on like trusted airlines is kind of a beneficial thing. Yeah.
Do you find yourself going through any sort of helpful rituals or anything before you fly, just to kind of keep your nerves calm, or anything that for example, when you're traveling presumably you grab a flight from Perth to like London or whatever.
Well, Perth, it goes Perth to Dubai to London. So it ends up being about 21 hours.
Yeah, so that's like a day that effectively just disappears, right?
Yes.
So how are there any little things that you can do to just prepare yourself for that? Because it must be weird when you look at your phone calendar and you're like, that day is just basically a write-off. I'm just going to be up in the sky for that day.
Totally. I mean, I have an amazing psych who did this like great it's a bit complex, but she she did this great hypnotherapy thing on me, and it sounds crazy, but it really worked. And she used these words. Essentially, it's like a guided meditation. And she had me lay down. I shouldn't be telling you all this, but whatever. She had me lay down, and she would say trigger words like airport, running late, turbulence, seatbelts, air conditioning, all these things that trigger my fear, I guess, of flying, all these kind of weird takeoff, landing, all these words that I guess spark that little fear thing in my brain. All the while, she's giving me a guided meditation of like swimming in the ocean. So she's telling me this story about me swimming in the ocean. She's like, imagine that you're, diving into the water, blah, blah, blah. And then she'll just drop those words into the guided meditation. So you got to kind of go back every kind of few months to kind of get a top up of it, I guess. I'm not running around like a chicken or anything. But for a while there, I would get this image whenever someone said airport or anything to me, without realizing it, I would have this flash in my brain. And it would be this like this little picture of a wave would disappear or something like that. It's amazing, honestly. I'd never thought I would be. I always thought that my brain would be too conscious to be hypnotized. Do you know what I mean? But she managed to get me. And for a while there, she really managed to kind of get into my head and make me think about. She just like put this subconscious relaxation thing on me, and that really helped. So if anyone out there has got a bad fear of flying or a bad fear of anything, check out hypnotherapy, like a really good psychologist, Tip for the musicians out there who are scared
definitely.
of flying.
Particularly the ones that have to do that.
So many musicians are. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think we had Courtney Barnett came on the podcast almost a year ago to the day. Sat where you're sat right now, and she was just talking about just the toll of moving around to that extent.
Yes.
Particularly, I mean, you pretty much, your base, your home is almost. It couldn't really be further from where we are right now.
It's the most isolated city in the world. Perth is, it's geographically the most isolated metropolitan city in the world.
Yeah.
So
so whenever
pay the price.
Exactly. So you hop over here you must kind of presumably you're in London for a few days, a week or something before you have to go back, and so your body's only just getting used to being here to then swap back there.
Yes. I came to London for 2 days last year, and that I didn't get time to be jet lagged. Yeah, it was crazy. But someone in Courtney Barnett's band said something once, and I loved it. They were like, your resource on tour, it may have even been Courtney, your resource on tour when you're touring, what you feed on is food and claps. Just like, that's the thing that feeds you and keeps you going. Like, do we get the claps? Yes. Did we get the food? Yes. All right, next. Like that's your economy essentially when you're touring.
This is my fuel.
Yeah,
this is the only thing keeping me going.
Exactly. Food and claps. That sounds really bleak. Obviously there are some absolute, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining at all because it's just such a blah, blah, blah. You know that I'm grateful for all of this.
Yeah. But also, it's certainly not the most kind of physically or mentally easiest thing to cope with by making these, like, regularly making long journeys, and it's hard work.
It's definitely an interesting thing because it's not really a natural state of being, really. Humans, the closest thing you get is nomads, but they had their families with them when they moved around, Oops, I just hit the mic, sorry. But it's not a very normal state of being. I'm friends with Tyler Wright, who's a pro surfer. She won the WSL a few years in a row. She's incredible. But she came on tour with us for a little while. She's dating a friend of mine. And she was like, I don't know how you do this. And she travels the world surfing. You know what I mean? She does exactly what we do. But in terms of like the late nights, she's like, I'd be in bed by now and I'd be awake with like a green smoothie at 6 a.m. and I'd be hitting the surf. We're kind of like late night, get up early, get on a plane. It's like a very different, it's not exactly a promoting healthy living.
No,
I try
definitely.
to, but yeah.
I think it's been important to hear artists also talking in those terms a little bit more the last few years. Just, the conversation about sort of mental health in music and seems to have come to the forefront a little bit more in terms of just making people just a touch more aware of just it's ultimately, it's your job, it's the area you work in, and it's a fairly taxing kind of you already mentioned it, it's sort of it's unlike a lot of any other type of work. So it's been good to hear people talk about that and the strains it can put on people, I think.
Yeah, and to let people know that it's okay to feel that way as well, and that, you know, you don't have to drink, you don't have to, because the alcohol industry is so entrenched in the music industry and all of those things, and it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to fit that bill to make it as a musician. In fact, you probably shouldn't if you want to survive. Yeah.
Have you come up against those conventions of being like, turn up at a gig and they're like, oh, there's your 24
rider.
creative beers or whatever it is?
No, I've always been really sensitive to alcohol. I'm sensitive to everything. I can't even drink coffee without bouncing off the walls. I come pre-caffeinated. So I'm really sensitive to everything, which is good because my body tells me when something's not good for it. But also, like, it'd be nice to be able to bloody enjoy a glass of wine over dinner and not, you know, be pissed under the table, yelling abuse. No, I'm kidding. But, you know, I have to be really careful. And I get sick as soon as, if I have more than 3 or 4 drinks or whatever, my tonsils flare up and my immunity goes out the window. So I don't drink on tour. I drink when I'm home playing board games, you know, in that vulnerable state. Christmas Day, exactly. 7 a.m.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I don't conform to that. No.
So we talked a little bit about some of the stuff you've been able to do the last 18 months. Also had the opportunity to go on tour with some great artists. I'm thinking of recently people like Natalie Pratt.
Oh, yes.
What have you learnt from the experience of going on tour with artists like that?
Well, Natalie's just the most perfect example you could have chosen, because I learnt so much from her, touring with her. I hold her to such high regard as a musician, for one, and as a person. We both kind of had similar starts in that she played in another band for a long time, and you know, like myself. So we've both kind of been accompanists. Oh my God, for other people. But yeah, she conducts herself in such a professional way, and is so kind and caring. And I just watched the way, because when I went on tour with her, I was about to do my first Australian tour with a band. So I watched very carefully at how she, there were, you know, on a tour you get a lot of crisis situations happen, you know, guitars break, things happen, you know, shit happens on tour a lot. And I just watched the way that she conducted herself during those crises and during those things, and the way that she stepped back and allowed everyone to do their jobs. And I took that on board a lot when I went on tour, and I will hopefully continue to do that. I just really liked the way that she didn't feel the need to kind of be on top of everything, because that's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Is there a kind of tendency to feel like you need to do that, particularly when you're starting out, where you're like, I kind of need to know every detail. I need to, you sort of take part in the panic of if a flight is cancelled or whatever.
Absolutely.
And there are people around that are employed to help you
capable of,
get over
you know,
that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So she's amazing, and just watching her on stage, just her voice and everything like that. But even getting to do, like, I've got to do a lot of festivals with the same artists as well. So I've become good friends with Lucy Dacus, and Snail Mail, Lindsay, and Hayley Hendricks is another one that we've played a lot of the same festivals over here. And yeah, there's a bunch of bands that I have so much respect for, and I learn so much from. Like Lucy Dacus, I get all my book recommendations from her, you know, like everything. She's an encyclopedia.
This sort of skips ahead a little bit, but obviously what's been great, or certainly a trend the last couple of years maybe, when you've seen artists like Lucy Dacus and obviously Phoebe Bridgers, and they had projects like Boy Genius. And you've obviously played in bands in the past. Like, I mean, you're on the cusp of releasing your debut solo album as a solo artist. But will you in the future, do you think you'll invite the idea of being flexible and, you know, creating new bands or joining other bands briefly, because it's a thing you've done in the past? That's an idea that you like? The idea?
Definitely. I mean, I went on tour with Methyl Ethel on guitar for them, because their poor Hamish cut his hand open like a week before the tour of the festivals. So yeah, I had to learn their songs in about 10 days and make it happen. And if I, you know, the more opportunities I get to do things like that, the better. You know, that's how I get better at my instruments, you know, and also how you become kind of empathetic and aware of other people's projects and other people's visions, and not letting your, not thinking that my ideas are the be all end all of music ever, Beethoven, like I just, so it's a really good way to kind of like, it's really good for the ego to help other people, or just be part of someone else's project and sit back and just do your part, and that's it. And you don't have to add any fluff, just play the part and shut up, and if I get to do that, that'd be great. But also I'd love to do some co-writing and projects with other people and help people on their projects. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something I'm open to, but the album's kind of taking up the whole brain right now. Yeah. I'm being very selfish.
Well, we need to talk about that, because I haven't even mentioned it yet.
That's
and we're
all right.
over half an hour in. So Beware of the Dogs is the debut album. Before I kind of get into some of the standout tracks on that, I think a characteristic that people have often pointed towards when they've talked about your music so far is just how honest it is and how funny it is, but also tackles some pretty serious issues. Has that side of you always come out in the songs that you've written?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially just a dramatic version of me and how I have conversations with people and myself, and how I deal with things. I talk about it, I cry about it, then I laugh about it. That's kind of the only way I know how to process. So yeah, it was only ever going to be honest for me, because I don't think I think I would fatigue a lot quicker if I was touring songs that I didn't really resonate with, or that I didn't feel were actually me. If I had to kind of put on a character every night, I think I'd burn out a lot quicker, So yeah, I've never really thought about it. It's always that's just been how I write and how I process things.
Before I talk about or ask about a couple of the songs on there that I particularly love, Boys Will Be Boys is a track that people may have heard as one of the first things that you released. What has it been like performing that song as you have the last few years, as you've been like touring around and playing that in front of audiences, but obviously I presume having conversations with fans and people that have attended shows and festivals and things like that. So has that opened out? Have there been positive effects to being so direct and honest about what ultimately is a very kind of harrowing experience that your friend went through? So have you felt a positive energy come from writing like that?
Definitely. And I feel like if people hear that song and that's my first, if that's the first people hear of me, they know what they're getting. And I'm really glad that I did that, because my audience are so beautiful. The people that come and buy tickets to my gigs are such progressive and understanding people, or people that are willing to learn and stuff like that. And I'm really glad that I did that, because it gave me that opportunity to continue to speak out if I needed to, which I have done in a few of the songs on the album, but I write about other things too, but yeah, that song really has put me in situations I never thought I'd be in. I went on a panel with Henry Rollins at Splendour in the Grass Festival back home, and we got into a bit of an argument. It was great. I really like Henry. He said something a bit silly, like I don't think he meant it in that way, but he said something like, it's up to the women to educate the men on these things, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Henry, wait a second. But he straight away, was like, cool. Yeah, he retreated and understood. I really like Henry Rollins. He was really great. But that song has really kind of put me in situations where I'm like, I don't think I should be here. I don't know. I don't think I'm smart enough for this, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of just bluffing, really. I think everyone is. But yeah, I wrote that song 2 years before the Me Too movement. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that song would kind of come out at the same time, or come out a week before it happened. Yeah, 2 days before Harvey Weinstein was outed, I put that song out. It's the weirdest kind of serendipity ever. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's just what happened. And yeah, so that song and to be able to reach people with that message has just been so beautiful. Yeah, and I've had such wonderful feedback. I've had some absolutely fucking shithouse feedback from people, but mostly it's been lovely.
Has that been for people online?
Yeah.
So people that aren't willing to actually come and have a face-to-face constructive conversation.
Yeah, it's always just like death threats and stuff, just casual death threats. But yeah, it's just it's just people hiding in their mother's basement with KFC grease on their fingers, kind of, getting upset that I'm not talking about men all the time, Yeah.
Is it as easy to kind of brush that stuff off as you make it sound now?
Yeah.
Or is it actually quite, it can be a bit disturbing?
When it first started, when the trolling happened for the first time, I had a bit of a day, I was pretty distraught, and yeah, spoke to, my best friend sent me chocolate. It was one of those days kind of, and that was tough. But then I processed it and dealt with it, and now I find ways to kind of talk about it. And I think the main thing for me was with the album, not letting that stop me in what I was going to say. And in fact, it kind of fueled me.
I was going to say, was it a sign that you were actually doing something important and necessary and right?
Totally. And also, it also made me realise how lucky I am, because I'm a white girl, so I fit into a pretty common stereotype, and for me to be getting trolled is pretty crazy. But I think about friends of mine who are women of colour, non-binary people, trans people, who speak out, and the shit that they cop is just like tenfold to what I have received. And I think about that all the time, and I think if I'm using my privilege to do something, then I'm doing something right. It fuels it.
I was going to say, does it feel like because you're gaining a platform, you have obviously a platform already, but it feels like one that's only growing. So does it feel important to use your platform to say things that are personally important to you and that hopefully have a kind of wider positive repercussions?
Absolutely. I've always, even before I had any sort of, before anyone knew who I was, I would put things on Facebook and Instagram. You know what I mean? It's a kind of, I've always been like that, and I just never let it stop when things went a bit crazy. And my parents were like, "Oh my God, just like, what are you doing?" But then they fully jumped on board and realised. And I remember talking to them, and because Mum called and was like, be careful, be careful. Now that you've got this, you should be grateful and I'm like, Mum, this is actually more reason for me to continue. And I think, as soon as I stop using that platform to make a change, I should get off the platform and give it to someone else. That's how I feel. I feel like there is a long list of names who deserve that platform and are waiting for it. So I'm going to continue to, while I'm on the podium, while I've got the mic, I'm going to continue to kind of stir shit up a little bit. Yeah.
Away from Boys Will Be Boys, you already mentioned it, there's a kind of huge variety of kind of themes on the album. It's a really funny record.
Thank you.
It's a really sweary record, which I really like.
I know.
Very,
I said,
almost swearing.
16 times in Season's Greetings. Yeah, I know that because we did the radio edit version, and there were 16 pauses.
Of course, yeah. And actually, so I was going to say, Season's Greetings is my favourite song on the album.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'll let you explain. It's kind of a story of being surrounded by a family and maybe their expectations of what, or family and friends maybe perhaps, about kind of what they think that you should be doing, and you're maybe you're stepping too often outside of the box, and what are you up to kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it ends with this sort of like a kind of sweary outro, which I personally thought was pretty funny.
Thank you. We were going to replace all the fucks with dog barks, but it became too busy, so we just did the mutes. Yeah, that song, you've pretty much captured it in a nutshell. It's like capturing that Australian family Christmas. Any family Christmas, really. But I do a little hat tip to Paul Kelly, who's got a song called How to Make Gravy, and it's about Christmas. And everything I write is based on something, but it's hypothetical in a broader sense. And, the details of it are relatively hypothetical. So just trying to capture the essence of the Australian. I remember trying to through the window when Talia and Jenny, Talia's my drummer and Jenny's my bass player, we recorded it to tape machine. So it was a very kind of scary process because tape's expensive, and they wanted to get it right pretty soon. There was no editing or anything like that. So I remember going through the microphone to Talia, who had her headphones on. She was drumming, and I was like, "Okay, Talia, pretend that you've just walked into family Christmas, and someone's just dropped a plate of sausage rolls on the floor, and because someone's made a homophobic comment across the table to your cousin who hasn't come out yet, and imagine that." And she played, and we got the tape straight away. She got it. It just was so perfect, and her and Jen just locked in together, and we had the track 4 takes in. It was amazing.
You must have some telepathy if you kind of go through a description like that, and I know exactly what you mean. I got it. I got this.
Exactly. It was so fun getting to paint the pictures of each song, especially the funny ones. I was like, "Okay, Natalia, I want you to imagine that you're walking in," just every different song had a different scenario, and that really helped her kind of get into the zone, and it was fun.
The sort of humour side of it, so your sense of humour really comes out on the album. are you a fan of like comedy? Like, what do you like, stand-up comedy or like TV comedy? Because it does feel like there's almost like one-liners on there. It's kind of, there's like punchlines and kind of, and like you say, it's sort of and like profanities for profanity's sake because it's funny and stuff like that. So does that come into it anywhere along the line?
I mean, my dad, when we moved to Wales, my dad couldn't get a job as a school teacher over here because the Welsh education system was really different to the Australian one for some reason. So he would be a stay-at-home dad while mum would go out and work as a nurse, and then at night he would go and do comedy clubs to make money. So dad played guitar and wrote songs about Princess Diana and all sorts of bullshit that I probably don't want to talk about now because it was 1998 and it's probably fucking super offensive. Anyway, I think he's had a few chairs thrown at him in his time. So yeah, dad did that for a while, and I guess dad would sing songs and we'd make up songs together all through my childhood. And I remember my 18th birthday, my dad changed the song by Jason Mraz, I'm Yours by Jason Mraz. Dad changed the words to that to Up Yours, and essentially told all my school friends about the only time you get off the computer is when you do a poo, and all these really embarrassing things. Essentially he told it in the form of song, and I've got friends that still remind me of that to this day, and remember when your dad sang that song?
So what, on your 18th birthday, a party? It
was my birthday party,
and all your friends were there, and your dad
got up and sang that song
and sang a Jason Mraz
got everyone
song.
to sing along, and the Up Yours was the main Up Yours, and it was fucked.
I like the sound of your dad.
Oh, he's
He
great.
sounds like a big character.
Classic. He's a classic. And he does it for everyone's birthdays. If it's someone's, if it's his, my Auntie Mary, it was her 50th, and he did a beautiful song for her. And it was heartfelt, but then he'd add these fucking really hectic kind of, one-liners in that everyone would laugh at. And it's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
So,
It sounds like a business opportunity. We should get your dad to we could feed your dad various anecdotes about people, and he could turn it into a song. And it could be hey, you got your birthday song from Stella Donnelly's dad. He did it for all the staff
at his work. Exactly. I know. He does it for all the staff from this. If it's the staff's member's birthday, he'll get in and write a song. He'll just change the words to a song and write like that. So he's a classic, my dad. Oh my God.
Do you think that, does it come, right at the start of the podcast, we talked about your mum and of her Welsh compassion and kind of, do you think, in a weird way, what we've ended up talking about is the two sides or two big characteristics of your music, the sort of compassion of
mum's really gentle and
and then your dad's kind of comedy. Hang on, have we just got to the root of it
crazy.
all?
We have essentially, we've hit the gold mine. Dad. I'm mostly like my dad in characteristics. He's very kind of outspoken and commands a room in a way that isn't always appropriate and just he's great. He knows I love him. He's the best. And my friends love him. They all gravitate towards him, and he's had to get up and do a couple of speeches at local Perth award nights or whatever, and he's got up and sworn his ass off on stage, and everyone likes my dad more than they like me, to be honest. But that's where that kind of comedy, I guess, comes from. But also I am into stand-up. I love James Acaster. I think he's wonderful, and he's a genius. And he manages to do comedy without pulling the piss out of any minorities. You know what I mean? He manages to he's so intelligent. And I've got so much respect for him.
Have you managed to see him live?
No.
He performs in London a fair bit, so you're going to have to time it with a UK tour or something.
Yeah, that moment when he played that tiny, whatever it was a tiny little miniature keyboard, and he tried to play Old Lang Syne on it. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. I had tears rolling down my face. He's the best.
Midnight Chats is a Loud and Quiet podcast. Production by Emma Snook. Music courtesy of Gold Panda. Search Midnight Chats on iTunes for more episodes and to subscribe. For more information, visit loudandquiet.com.